My name's Keith Cooper of Northlight Images. In this video I'm going to address an issue, printer and paper gamut. I call it the Gamut Delusion because I see so much concern over comparative gamuts of papers, of printers, of ink sets and things, and it does people a disservice. Now I'm going to go through what I mean when I talk about printer gamut. But essentially, somebody asked me the other day, they said, oh, I was looking at such and such, but this paper has a slightly smaller gamut. Is the one with the bigger gamut better? And that, in a nutshell, is the misunderstanding or potential misunderstanding that I'm going to try and address here. It is nowhere near as important as people would make out. Why do I not have gamut comparisons, charts, tables and things like that in my printer and paper reviews? Primarily, the reason is that without a lot of explanation and additional information to explain all the caveats and gotchas in it and little bits and pieces, they are meaningless. So, what is a gamut? I've got a couple of diagrams here. I've opened up some profiles using the Mac ColorSync utility. It's a great little bit of software. It's been around for years on Mac systems, and it allows you to check what profiles you've got installed on your system. Does lots of other things as well, which people don't tend to cover so much. But if you've got a Mac, have a look at it, and it's a useful thing. This is the classic chart, the classic solid gamut model that you see, and I've opened up two here. They are of, and you can move them around and do things like that. Now they are of two different papers here as well. This is from when I was recently doing some profiling here of the 8550. Now the two that I've got here, one of them is Canson Rag Photographique 310, and the other one is a Canon Pro Luster. Now, I'll come back to these in a bit, but these are the sorts of diagrams that you see. If you see lots of stuff like this in a printer review, without explanations of what it means and why it may not tell you as much as you think it does, then be suspicious. What's a gamut? The gamut is just a boundary condition. Think of all the different colours, and these are printer profiling targets. There are about nearly 3,000 patches on this, and this is using Epson proofing paper, and it's a sort of semi-gloss, semi-matte, who knows, these things mean whatever you want them to mean, paper, and it has all these colours on it. Now, this is not every colour that the printer can produce, but it is a range of colours that I print to establish all sorts of things about how the printer paper driver combination work together. But there are strong colours in this which are in the file which won't get printed. The software, when you analyse this, knows what these colours should be from the values. It knows what the measurements are from the spectrophotometer I use, and I use a scanning spectrophotometer, so I can read this sheet in one go. It takes about 15-20 minutes though to do it properly, but even so it's an automated process, so I don't have to manually measure each patch. And looking at this, it allows the software to decide what is the range of colours that the printer can reproduce. That goes from at the top, and this little diagram here, that is white, that's paper white. You can't get any whiter than paper white, essentially, on a paper like this. And at the bottom is the darkest black. Now, that's also sometimes you'll see values referred to as Dmax values. That's the density, that's how black is the blackest black of the paper. Now, I addressed this a little bit the other day when I did a video about black point correction or black point compensation, and how the black point varied between papers. Now, when you look at these shapes here, as I said, they're a boundary condition. They tell you the extreme range of colours that the printer can manage. Most real-world images sit firmly inside that shape in terms of their brightness and their colour. They don't hit the edges very much. Now, part of what you can do if you do soft proofing and do it with care, you can see whether there are colours in your image which are going to be out of gamut, and how, if that's going to be a problem. If they are colours down the bottom here in the dark colours, so typical sort of in a woodland scene, dark brownish green foliage and shadow, well, that may well be out of gamut, but it probably doesn't matter that much. Whereas if you've got bright, colourful objects in the scene, you may well be outside of this. But I say most real-world images do not trouble this shape on a good printer. So why the importance of gamut? Well, it's a nice, readily identifiable thing. It's a pretty graph, a pretty shape. Don't underestimate when you're writing reviews, the temptation is to put lots of whizzy stuff in that looks great. Now, I write long reviews. I make no apology for that. I put a lot of detail in. If I'm going to put something like this in, I need to explain it, which is why I don't put this in, because that's an entirely different job. If you want to know all the details of this, there's a book up here, Real World Colour Management. I mentioned it in the BPC video the other day. That's the one to have a read of. That's got lots of information on it. But that boundary condition, think of it in a car analogy as the top speed of a car. So you might say this car has got top speed of 160 miles an hour. This car has got a top speed of 180 miles an hour. Does that mean that this car with the 180 mile an hour top speed is better than the one with the 160 mile an hour? Well, of course not. I've not told you anything else about the cars whatsoever. I've not told you how many seats they've got, what the luggage capacity is. I've not told you, for example, that the 180 mile an hour one takes about a minute in its 0 to 60 time. Now, that's horrendous. The 160 mile an hour one does it in 7 seconds. That's reasonable. So if you just looked at that boundary condition, the gamut volume, you would think, oh, 180 mile an hour, oh, that's good. That must be better. Whereas if you actually looked at all the other factors, so when you're looking at papers, you're looking at surface texture, sheen, is there any bronzing? There's all sorts of stuff that when you look at prints, and I did a video about what I look for when I'm comparing papers and evaluating printers and things. Did a video about that recently. But when you look at stuff like that, there is so much more. So that's why if you see people saying, oh, well, this particular paper, and the absolute worst thing about this is when you see numbers ascribed to this. This paper has a gamut volume of 826,000 bananas, or whatever the unit is. There's no, or this paper has a gamut volume of 740,000. Therefore, 740,000, that's less than 800,000 bananas, so it must be worse. Well, no, they're different. These are two very different papers. This is Innova High. It is a smooth, bright white paper printed on this 8550 here using the VFA setting. That's a really nice paper. Really nice prints off it. I like this smooth paper like this. It's a cotton rag paper. It doesn't have, I can see just here, and I'm not sure whether the video will show this, but the intensity of colours is much stronger on this one. But this is like a thin proofing paper, semi-gloss. I much prefer this, even though its gamut is less than this. Well, of course it is. It's a matte paper. The black is not so much. If you want to have a bigger gamut, you just make the black a little bit blacker. Now, that depends on the actual ink or something like that. But, there are differences between them. So, they are two very different papers there for very different purposes. You would use them for different reasons. A lot of it comes down to what you like on it. Now, why are people concerned about these things? Or why am I concerned that people make so much of it? Well, I think it doesn't give the full story. I go to try and go to a great deal of effort to not introduce things into written articles. Videos are a little bit different, but I try and not to introduce things which I haven't put explanations or links to explanations for. It comes from my sort of scientific research background. You don't just introduce stuff and just leave it at that. Likewise, you don't just plonk a graph in the middle of a research paper because you feel that a graph would look good. So here's a graph of paper characteristics. Well, that makes the paper look good. No. It actually has to have some meaning. Worse than these, in many ways, are diagrams you'll get about colour accuracy. And these show how accurate particular colours are reproduced on a particular paper on a particular printer. So it's used for comparing printers, it's used for comparing papers as well. To my mind, that's even worse than just talking about gamut volumes, because one of the things, and I covered this in the BPC video the other day, is that in order to fit a real world image into this shape, and remember this is the boundary condition, so you can't get brighter, stronger colours, darker colours than you've got here or here. To fit that, that's what rendering intents do in profiles. So when you have the choice of perceptual or relative colorimetric rendering intents, or the other, there are others as well, but those are the two common ones. They govern how the image is fitted into this space, because this space is all the printer can manage with a particular paper. Now, in doing that, there will be changes. So there may be, for some rendering intents, hue changes. This is a thing that you get from how you make your profiles. It's also the profile creation software. The people who wrote that have lots of trade-offs to consider in how they're going to map the colours in your image to what can be printed. That means different profiling software, or even different versions of the profiling software, may produce subtly different profiles. So when you see in a review a diagram with, it's usually sort of little arrows and dots and coloured dots and things like this, and there's numbers and things to go with it as well, because having tables of numbers gives a sort of spurious authenticity to other things as well. So when you see that, remember that although it says this is how this printer and paper handles a particular colours, what you're actually saying is this is how this printer, this paper with these inks handles these particular colours with the particular profile I'm using. So if I wanted different results, I just use a different profile, use different software to create it. So there's all sorts of things like that. And to my mind, that means that these charts and things, they are there as pretty filler. There's nothing more to them. Now, if somebody wants to go to the trouble of explaining what these are and also saying what their limitations are, then I'm happy with that. But I don't like the idea of just going, here, look at this graph. Notice the shape of the graph. I think it says all you need to know. It says nothing. It's a line on a piece of paper, on a screen, in a presentation or something like that. It means absolutely nothing. So why do people bother with such things? Well, numbers. Now, there is a subset of photographers who are, to my mind, unduly influenced by the numbers, whether it's be lens performance, megapixels, gamut volumes. Now, these numbers give a spurious air of precision. So I get the same problem when I'm looking at hyperfocal distance setting and using apps for setting tilt angles on tilt shift lenses. You can't set lenses to better than a half a degree or so when you do a tilt on a lens. So to say that you need a tilt of 1.64 degrees and that you need to focus your lens at 11.6 meters is a nonsense. Precision does not mean that the numbers are accurate, and nor does it mean that they are relevant or meaningful. Remember, just data on its own doesn't mean anything. It has to have meaning attributed to it, and then it's up to you to decide whether it's worthwhile. And that's one of my issues with this sort of stuff, is that you don't get anything, you just get numbers presented. Right, I'd say graphs, charts, yes, they also give a spurious sense of expertise. Yes, look, I can point to a book on colour management, I've got graphs, I must know what I'm talking about. Yeah, if only that was so. Now, hopefully I do know what I'm talking about, some of this, because there's an awful lot of this stuff I leave out quite deliberately from my videos, my reviews and that, because it is of the level that you do not need to know it. And if you do want to know it, there are books that you can get it from, and articles and things as well on it. But where do these numbers, they partly come from the desire of some people writing reviews or doing video reviews to help you make your choice. Now, by saying, this particular printer and paper combination scored 76.4% on our rating scale. This one here scored 68.9%. Well, this one's higher, so it must be better than this one. That's because people want simple answers. Now, I make no apologies for it. I don't care if you want simple answers. If you've got this far into one of my videos, you'll know that I really don't want to give simple answers when simple answers are wrong in many ways. Yeah, if that's a complaint, if that's why you want these numbers, then go for it. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm just saying it's not an approach I feel I can support in any way. But above all of this, and all of this sort of spurious data and things like this, is the fact that modern printers of reasonable quality, and that goes from this Epson 8550, there's an Epson P5000 here, I've got the Canon Pro 1100 downstairs. On any of those printers, you can produce great looking prints. To say is one better than another is to misunderstand the differences between them. So this is a 13-inch printer. This has got pigment black and then dye inks. This one here is a pigment ink printer. It's 17-inch, it's got roll paper. The Pro 1100 downstairs is 17-inch, not roll feed. It's also got pigment inks. There are subtle differences between them. Stuff like this, to use this as a comparison as to what you should get, is simply wrong. Now, ask me privately what I think, of a particular printer, and I'll tell you my own personal opinions. Would I use it? Do I like it? Do I not like it? Publicly, though, as far as I'm concerned, on any current printer, good quality printer, you can produce great prints. And if you cannot produce great prints on a printer like this, a printer like that, it is your fault. It is completely your fault. It is your photography, it is your editing, it is your use of the printer. Now, does that sound unduly harsh? Yeah, it is, but it also applies to me as well. If I can't make great prints on these, then I'm doing something wrong. And that's it. And all of this sort of stuff, yes, it's pretty graphs and things like that, but please just don't be swayed by it. Concentrate on the fact that modern printers are great. The differences you're more likely to choose ones from are costs of ink, ease of use, roll paper support, and all sorts of other things. If you're choosing a printer or paper, things like this should be mere extra bits of information. So don't fall for the Gamut Delusion. Now, I'm sure there's some people will disagree greatly with what I've said here. I don't care. I've been doing the printer testing and reviews for many years, and I'm happy to stand behind what I've said. The videos, I would say, are shot in one take without a script. So if you see bits of text occasionally pop up in the corner, it's where I've gone through on editing and realised I've not been clear enough in saying something, or have got something wrong, like calling this a PowerBook when it's a MacBook Pro. Because you know, anyway, that goes back years of Mac stuff. Hope that's been of some interest. Thanks for watching, particularly those of you who've worked your way through it all. Please do pass the channel on to other people, and there you go. Questions are always welcome. Thank you.